Welcome back to the Journey of Now with myself, Karis, and my partner, Nick. And today we're continuing with part 3 of our series with our journey into inner child healing and things that we wish we heard when we were children, and even now as adults, still healing from those things that we experienced in our past. And for anyone that's trying to reprogram things so you can start not just embodying but embracing a different life and a different way forward. And the previous ones we did were I will not abandon you and I do not have to participate in this. And today's one is I am not what I've done. And it really just is a conversation that we had amongst ourselves, which is like, when did it become this thing where making mistakes isn't okay? Like, when did it become this thing where, being a human being or just having the ability to be able to give ourselves grace to move through things and whatever it looks like, stop being something. We have to apply some standard of perfection or some standard of, it's already done, or we already are, or some copy and paste version of society's expectation, instead of this is my process and it's going to look messy, it's going to look like this.
I think it's that permission slip that you give yourself again, just to navigate the process of deconditioning with a lot more ease and leeway. Mm-hmm. Because I find that when we're not coming in with self-compassion, and when we are not maybe in a space where we are able to reframe the idea of a mistake as a moment of feedback or a moment of learning,
or part of the process.
Yes. Yeah. Then we get stuck in this whole notion of disappointment.
Yeah.
We become disappointed within ourselves. We feel that maybe in comparison to the ideals and assumptions and just the overall expectation around what we should be able to do and what we're able to navigate, we tend to really carry it with a lot of weight. And it feels so much bigger than what it needs to be. So a couple of just interesting signs with regards to being within disappointment.
Or just constantly experiencing that cycle of consistent disappointment, consistently being disappointed by someone else or even by yourself, and how that feels in the body. So, what would it look like if someone has had a long-term, what would the impact be if someone has had a long-term pattern of this?
I think that's something that I've experienced and I think a lot of people do as well. It's you're kind of numb to life. You're not excited about new experiences. You're not excited about anything. Everything just feels like it's this mundane activity that I've just got to go and get through it and navigate this to the best of my ability.
I remember earlier in our relationship, I would always say to you, you know what, I don't have any good expectations or bad expectations. I'm just going to go in there and see how it is. And that's not what it should be like, Yeah, I think it's almost because your mind is set up for either failure or disappointment so much so that you just have learned to condition yourself to not expect anything.
Yeah.
And that's when it becomes dangerous, because you set the precedent for what your life is going to look like and the tone for how people treat you. And when you go in there with no standards, no expectations, and you just leave room for people to muck about and do what they want. And so this is where we have to take accountability and ownership within our life to just rewire these patterns within ourselves through awareness, through self-compassion, and through grace. So it's not something that we fix overnight, but it comes with a
process.
And it comes with being able to respect ourselves enough to know that we're worthy of having great expectations. We're worthy of having our expectations not only be met but exceeded. And when you start telling yourself those things, then watch how your life shifts, because those things actually start showing up in your space instead of, this person's probably not going to show up.
And I think that leads to the next one, because you're always looking at worst case scenario.
And prepping for them.
It's like you're doomsday prepping 24/7. Everything becomes risk. Everything is, cup half empty, spilt milk. It's literally going through your day and life as if you're walking on eggshells the whole time. And it's one of the most frustrating experiences to go about a day and keep on waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Can't even enjoy your experience of joy or enjoy enjoyment itself. You're just waiting for something to happen so that you can prove yourself right. And because you're preempting the feeling of that, it's almost like you're bringing it in so much faster. It's going to happen. You know, it's that whole notion of
Like attracts like.
yeah, that I mean, we've had a couple of instances in our life where we've been around very like negative people who are very cynical. Even myself and Nick have been in that space where like that's just how we thought. When I got my first car, I was in a car accident, and then after that, I was in another car accident.
In the same car.
In the same car. That's a whole other conversation. We'll go into that. But while we were in that car, I kept saying to myself, oh, we're probably going to be in another car accident. This car isn't going to last long. Like, we're probably, like, it. And that's exactly what happened.
And to the T.
To the T.
That's just
And like I kept, every time I got into that car, I would prep myself on a somatic level for like, this is what I'm going to do if I'm in another car accident, or like those type of things. And then that's exactly what happened. And I'm not saying it has to be that extreme, but even within relationships, whether it be romantic or friendship, you know, if you constantly prep yourself for relationships where you have to over give and you're constantly auditioning and you never feel like you're enough, then you're always going to be met with people who treat you like you're not enough. Because the world is only going to prove to you what you already believe within yourself, and it's just going to mirror that.
That's it. The next one would be, you don't like promises. They feel empty. It's as if you're unable to trust yourself and trust or put your trust in other people as well, because you've been disappointed so many times, and you only trust when you actually see the needle moving, when you see that there's an action associated with that conversation or words that have been said, that you're waiting for that. Personally, I'm on that. I experience that very often in business. If someone says they're going to do something and you're not moving the needle forward, and I'm already expecting. I'm looking at all the ways. I go back into step 2, which is I'm looking for how the shoe's going to drop. I'm looking for how you are going to fail yourself and even myself, and how I failed myself within the context of that conversation.
It's so interesting when you're working with more than one person and you have to rely on other people or wait for them to action something or put something in motion, and how that pattern comes up. But what a relief it is when you actually work with competent people who do their part and who show you that you can rely on them.
So the fix with this, honestly, is it's really beginning to trust yourself, understand your values, understand who you are and who you wish to identify yourself as, and who you want to identify with. What are the type of people that you want to be surrounding yourself with, who's holding the same values, who is living from a space of authenticity and integrity where their word actually means something.
And people who are initiators and who action things when they say they're going to do things. Because that was like a process for you, I think. And for a long time, what you were saying was like, oh, I'm so tired of like working with people who don't do what they say and who are late in their responses. They don't take initiative for anything. And then when you started shifting that self-talk in terms of, you know what, actually, I'm going to start telling myself.
And then you get the most amazing, you work with the most amazing people. Like in my business, I get to work with the most amazing clients, people that are like, I am here taking accountability and responsibility for myself. If I said I'm going to order this product, I've ordered this product. If I said I'm going to message you every day with my why, I am doing that. And how that has drastically not only shifted their life, but it's shifted mine, because that feels really good. It feels it's not even an exchange, but the way that entire dynamic works, it just feels easy. It feels like breathing. It feels natural.
I think another component is how much of a betrayal it then can be when someone doesn't adhere to the promise that they've made, or they don't keep their word, or when they actually do disappoint you and they prove you right. And it feels like such a deep, it's like the worst thing that they can do.
And it feeds that, the second thing that we mentioned, because now you're walking on eggshells, you're waiting for that moment. You're waiting to be proved right. You're just waiting for proof. And you already had the niggle, you had the feeling, but then it comes back to you, not to that person. We go, well, why are you allowing people like that into your space? What are they reflecting towards you within yourself? What is being projected into your space? What are you projecting into your space?
Yeah, that like
It's not even just the reflection, it's also the projection, because that's what's coming through. And now it becomes a really powerful conversation that you get to have with yourself and say, well, goodness, if I am surrounding myself with individuals that are not able to maintain their word, how am I honoring my own word?
Yeah.
Because I maybe set a boundary and said, I don't want people like this, but yeah, I've just allowed that person into this place.
But where in your space are you doing that within yourself and your own boundaries? Because
But that's the boundary. That's already the boundary. You'd say, no, I didn't want people like that in that space, but I'm now allowed that person into my space.
Because I used to do that in business. I would be like, I'm not going to accept this behavior from clients or whatever else, but I was accepting that from friends. And then all that was showing me is like it's two sides of the same coin. And if I'm accepting that disrespect and that level of crossing of my boundaries and standards that I've set for the relationships that I want in my life now, where it's going to transition into every aspect of my life, because one of my core beliefs is how you do one thing is how you do everything.
Correct.
And so when we come back to that whole notion of when did it stop being okay for people to make mistakes? Because now if you're on a somatic level experiencing that constant level of disappointment within yourself and distancing yourself from actually experiencing good things and allowing your mind, which is just there for survival, to run wild and take the lead on something that it shouldn't be leading, then we move into spaces where we don't let ourselves do things that are part of the process. You know, you become afraid of actually actioning things, of doing things, and mistakes, or whatever word you choose to call it, they become intolerable. And you become afraid of doing anything unless it is wrapped up with a pretty bow of like success and perfection. Because ultimately you're going to be disappointed if you hold that belief there, which is what we did for a long time. And it was so frustrating because I felt like I just started coming up, but then mudslide and I'm down there again. And so this was honestly one of the things that drastically shifted the way that we live our life, the way we do our business, the way we even interact with each other. Because for a long time, our relationship felt like that, just like massive uphill battle. And I always had that thing of disappointment. I contrast that, all of these things. But it was majority of the time because I also didn't allow myself to see this as this is a part of the process. This is a part of growing. We're fumbling. We're figuring it out. You have to learn to walk before you run.
And it comes back to this idea when you are trying to place trust within a person or something, you're basically saying that you're not trusting yourself.
Yeah.
You look, and maybe this isn't the popular opinion, but it's a thing of you have to cultivate that trust within yourself where your word means something, where your boundaries mean something, where your principles mean something, where your values mean something, where your word, when spoken out loud to another individual, holds weight. Yeah. If you do not have that, how can you expect to find that, let alone attract people into your space that hold similar principles and values that dictate how they live out their life?
I think another reason why people choose not to be able to transition into the next phase of their life, is because they want to punish themselves for the things that they've done. And it still ties into that whole thing, because I know you did it for a long time, where it's like, I can't have what I want because of what I've done and who I was. And
I was unable to let go of that identity. I was bringing that with me into the present, and the present is trying to be what it's doing and evolve and shift and show me that there is change. But I kept on bringing up that same thought process.
Like it was very personal. Yeah. Like I failed.
Everything was personal.
Yeah.
Everything.
So I failed, and so now I'm a failure.
But it wasn't just that. It's like now I failed, and then just to add the context that I failed as a father, I failed as a partner, I failed as a man, I have failed as a son, I have failed as a provider, I have failed as a person that wanted to create a business. I have fucked up my life. And then we go into the space where we tailspin.
And then you think because of those actions that you are the sum of all the ways that you fucked up, so you're just a fuck up.
Yeah.
And that's the thing of when did we stop learning that making mistakes is okay? You know, we all have this fundamental thing that happens in our journey that changes who we are on a cellular level. And then everything, and it's most likely something that we either are inspired by or something we regret.
Yeah.
For majority of us, it's the regret. So we make a mistake, we do something that deeply impacts us or someone else or the people around us. And then that forces us or brings in the awareness that we have to change things. But this is the thing. You know, you're not what you've done. You are who you choose to become. And this is where that grace and that self-compassion and that like shifting that self-talk comes in, because you have to forgive yourself for what you didn't know when you didn't know it. Because in that moment when you were doing it, did you know better? No. But when you have the awareness and you're like, oh, actually, I shouldn't, then you continue doing that, then that's a choice. But when you stop doing it and you have the awareness, like you're already making shifts to become better. And that's where that self-forgiveness and that compassion comes in, because everybody comes in and then they hold that shit above your head. You don't change, or that's who you are. And then they come in with this notion of, yeah, but I know who you are. Remember that shit that you used to do, and remember how mean you were to other people, and remember how you used to bully me and all of those things. Well, maybe I use that as the crux to shift into compassion, because that's how I really felt about myself.
And you just were never taught the tools to express it and make sense of it within yourself. Yeah. So, honestly, the invitation with moving forward is really recognizing that whenever there's change, whenever there is awareness, change is a natural consequence of that awareness. You cannot unsee something once you have seen it. As you become aware of it, so you will change. But when you have become aware, that also means that there's more accountability on your plate. It becomes more of a choice. Yes, you will fuck up. You will fail. You will not get it right time and time again. But it's that continuous notion of I'm failing forward. I'm getting feedback. The same as where you learned how to walk as a babe, and you fell and you fell, and eventually you could get 2 steps, and then eventually you could get 3 or 4, and eventually you're walking or you're waddling and having to hold on to things, and eventually you're just walking and then you're running. It's the same process. Yeah. Change does require consistent effort.
But it also, if you really want to heal from that thing, it really comes from a space of deep self-compassion. Sure. And
whilst you're on the journey.
Yeah, and it's a very gentle love upon yourself, and it's a very deep dive into that realm of self, and it goes beyond our concepts of right or wrong, beyond what we've done and who we've hurt and what we think are our attachments to the story that we hold.
What's done is done. You cannot undo what you've done. And it's a sense of just learning and making peace. For an action that you've taken, you can never go back and take back the actions and the words that you've said.
And I really implore you to listen to our previous episodes if you haven't, because all of them build upon one another. You know, you start at the foundation of I will not abandon you when it gets difficult, when I've made mistakes and I view myself in this space. But when you get to the thing of, oh, actually, it's okay for me to make mistakes and I'm not what I've done. They both tie hand in hand. It's the same thing, just on a different level, if that makes sense.
Just from a different view.
And so my invitation to you today really is to just sit with what you've done. Where you're holding on to things that you've done in your past, you don't need to. You know, you're making active shifts to move into a different space, and you're sitting here listening to this for reasons, or for those reasons already, which really know where the universe also denotes on a soul level that you are actively working on making this change. So congratulations. And you really have permission to let that go and to let that shit go and let those toxins out of your body, because it's going to make you sick if you continue holding on to that unforgiveness, especially towards yourself.
Keep fucking going.
So Join us on our next episode as we continue in this series. Have a beautiful day and keep being gentle with yourself and keep really learning to love and embrace who you are, because it's got nothing to do with what you're doing.
And don't forget to make the shift.